turning off at the beginning, Roger, because it's annoying.
Let's see. All right, so, all right, I think this should be the correct sharing of the screen. All right, great. So basically, hi everyone. It's really great to be here today. I'm going to talk about storytelling of playwright techniques. And there are a couple of things that I want people to keep in mind specifically when thinking about writing for the stage and writing for prose. And I'm going to do a little breakdown about the main differences, but also where there's overlap in which you can incorporate playwriting skills into prose writing. And I was talking with the presenters a little bit before. It's all about perspective. I think, we're all writers. We all have the same goals in how we express our stories, but we come at it from different directions. And it's something to keep in mind that playwrights think about how things look on the outside, while novelists usually think about how things look on the inside and project outwards. So just keep that in mind as just like a very general, flexible, like this is what tends to happen, and see how this presentation kind of impacts that mindset. So basically, theater is anything that an audience can witness. When we think about performance, the basic definition of performance is, the expression or movement, that happens in relation, between characters or between characters and their world that is witnessed by an audience. So already when you're thinking about performance, you're thinking about not just the relationship of the characters in the story, but the immediate relationship between an audience, the viewer, the reader, and the story in itself. So it creates kind of another level, another framework in which you can interpret the story. And playwrights are very conscientious of that. Novelists, while they're aware of that, their primary focus isn't much as the impression upon the reader, as much as the impression of these characters within the world of the story. And unless the novelist's style is particularly like fourth wall breaking, as an intentional purpose of the book, most books don't really address the readership itself. And that is really the big difference between what we think about when we think about playwriting and when we think about novel writing. So that being said, character interiority to playwright is simultaneously something that you can tell from the script itself, whether it's through dialogue, whether it's through stage directions, whether it's the director's choices, and also the actor's choices. It's a collaborative process that creates that space that is character interiority. On the other hand, for novelists, it's a little bit more concentrated. It's all focused on what the writer chooses to express on the page. Whether it's, oh, sorry, I just got the comment. Can you still see the slideshow? Okay, cool, just want to double check. So it all comes down to, how much interiority is the novelist willing to introduce to the page for the audience to understand. there's a common expression that novels are like walking a mile in someone else's shoes. It's that aspect of very close interiority where there isn't necessarily a difference between what the character is experiencing versus what the reader is experiencing. In theater, you get more space to interpret that, not just because of the physical setup that you are the witness watching a show, and you're actively aware of your outsideness, but also because a play in itself is not just the playwright's words. It's a collaborative exercise that creates meaning to the performance. A play that is just, on the page is a play. It is not the same thing as a performance. It is not the same thing as a theater show. It's that group effort that creates theater and makes it come alive. And for novelists, they do that on the page by themselves. So other things to think about when you're thinking about playwriting as a type of witnessing is that when you're watching someone act from the outside, there is a limited amount of interiority that you can surmise. Their actions are open to interpretation. People, never direct about what they want. But an effective play is when the audience can infer what the character wants, even if they don't say it out loud, because they can guess what their emotional life is going on inside their heads. Another big difference is in terms of plot. One of the things that novels can do very well is travel. Theater can travel as well, but it travels in a different way. When you're writing a novel, you can literally be like, all right, this person went from point A to point B, and now they're in outer space, and now they're traveling through time, and now they're, all in Antarctica. They can create the setting and the scene setting in a very concrete way that is acceptable to the reader because it's all on the page. The plot and the scene setting for theater is still effective, but it's effective to conceit that we are all in imaginative space. We are cognizant that we are in an imaginative space because we're physically in a theater. But we also have to, imagine that we are in the realm of the play that we're watching in front of us. And simultaneously, I think performance can be very effective in evoking an imaginative space. And the best plays are able to overcome the physical space that they're in to become emotionally immersive in a way that is different than when a novel is immersive, because of the readership experience in relationship to the book is more immediate in some sense, and it's more individualized, than most forms of theater. So that's why I also think about how books themselves are, they are a one-on-one relationship, whether it's between the reader and the story, or the reader and whatever the author is saying, or the reader and the character in their head. For most forms of theater, the experience is communal. It is not just you and the actors, it's you and everyone else in that audience having a reaction together. And next, theater and plotting. I mentioned earlier that one of the things I notice a lot in the difference between playwriting and novel writing, or screenwriting and novel writing, is that there's some type of writers who are very plot oriented and are very structured. There's some, novelists, and prose writers who are not, but for playwrights and for screenwriters, and to some extent other types of writers like graphic novelists, they are taught, structure as very foundational in how to tell a story in some ways. So we're going to talk about, theater structures and how that can also be translated in how you construct plotting for a book. So, there's like the classic Aristotle's 3-act structure, which, emphasizes first act is about the characters and the world and the moral question you're asking. It like continues when the inciting incident usually happens at the end of Act 1, where that morality is questioned, something changes in that world, something may change in that main character's life that prompts them to act. Act 2 is them reacting to the inciting incident, and perhaps plotting forces around them make them, put in more and more conflict or introspection or tension that culminates, in the climax of the piece. In Greek plays, it's also known as perhaps as the catharsis, where the audience has experienced this journey with the main character to the point of having a sense of release when the unfolding of the plot, is finished. And that is the result of that fallout, of that climax, of that pinnacle point, of that catharsis is known as a catastrophe, which I know today we associate the word catastrophe with something sad or tragic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the same definition in Greek theater. It's just the end result of whatever happened, as part of like the climactic arc of the story. There is also the 4-act structure, which had evolved out of actually as a spin-off of the 5-act structure, which I'll talk about in 2 shakes. But I figured to introduce it first because numerical order is cool. Where there are 4 acts. You might have also be familiar about the 4-act structure in screenwriting, which has a lot of similarities. Where the first act talks about the introduction to the world, the introduction to the characters, ends with the inciting incident. The second act is the build up of the immediate reactions that the protagonists or main characters have to the inciting incident. The third act is even, they sometimes call it the turn, like they're reacting to all the things they try to do at Act 2, which may or may not have gone well. It's also sometimes called like the hero-ally interactions, because this is when the main character might be confronted with questions that are connected to this turn, whether it's a shift in alliances, a twist in the plots, a culmination of like things continue to go bad, even for a moment when we thought it was going to be okay. All those elements are part of the Act 3, culminates in the midpoint, which leads to the climax of the story, and then the final resolution is Act 4, which is whether the main character succeeds or fails, in the arc of the story, whether the plot is resolved in a way that leads to the character's success or failure, and how the world itself has been changed because of the actions of the story. Finally, we're going to mention here the 5-act structure, also encompassed by Gustav Freytag's pyramid. As you can see in this classic example here, this is one way the 5-act structure can be plotted. This is a common, diagram that you've seen when talking about general plotting of a story. So, and to just go a little bit deeper into this, Shakespeare, of course, was the master of the 5-act structure. So to break it down a little bit more, I'm going to give an example with Romeo and Juliet. You see it in Act 1, the prologue talks about Verona, the conflict between the Capulets and the Montagues. You know, it's the setup of the world, and the crux of it is when Romeo and Juliet meet. That is the inciting incident. And the rising action, that is when, Romeo and Juliet like get to know each other more. That's the famous balcony scene. While conflicts between the Montagues and Capulets are escalating. In Act 3, the tensions between the two families continue. That is when Tybalt and Mercutio duel, and they die, and that escalates the tensions. It questions the possibility whether Romeo and Juliet can get together after all. Romeo is banished, but then that act ends with them deciding to get married. The following action is in Act 4, where people are reacting to the deaths that happened in Act 3, the secret wedding between Romeo and Juliet, prompting them to figure out a way to run away together. The plot with the poison and the friar, and the final confrontation, when at Juliet's grave, when they think that she's dead, and Romeo and Paris have a duel, and Romeo gets stabbed, and then she wakes up and like, oh my gosh, that's so sad. And Act 5, the denouncement, that is after the lovers have died. The Fur comes out. He explains like, this is what you did because of your hatred. Everyone's sad. This is the tragedy. You should have known better. Your world has entirely changed, and the families have to decide to somehow get along because you're prompted by the deaths of their children. So that is a breakdown of like the whole 5-act structure according to like, classic Shakespearean works. And a little bit more about the 4-act structure, which I had gone over a little bit earlier. This is basically a breakdown of what most screenwriters are familiar with when talking about the 4-act structure. As I mentioned before, it is setting up the story. It's introducing the character's main world and their perspective. It's setting up the expectations to the audience about what is going to be the main payoff. What does the main character want? What are their desires? What is their mission? And what are they going to try to do to get it? Act 2, traditionally, when people are talking about 3-act structures, and in relation to screenwriting, there has been struggles. Like screenwriters often say, like the Act 2 is the hardest act to write, in a 3-act structure, just because so much has to happen in order to make the plotting work, but also fit between 90 to 120 pages. So screenwriters tend to think in terms of page count, because they're very limited, in time of how much they want to convey in order to create a script that is filmable. We all know that there are many, films that are longer than 90 minutes, or longer than 120 minutes. But traditionally, that is what screenwriters have been taught to write towards to make the most producible film as possible. And so if a screenwriter had been thinking about breaking down a 3-act and have it be 30 pages for each act for a 90-minute screenplay, they might be like, how can I fit in Act 2 in 30 pages when so much has to happen. And so they solved that problem by saying, let's just think about it as a 4-act, and split it up that way, where Act 2A is just a protagonist's reaction to anything that happened in the inciting incident at the end of Act 1. And then Act 2B is everything that culminates to the midpoint, and the climax of the piece. And Act 3, would be the outcome and the denouncement of the screenplay. And this graph, I just like to include to really show that as much I describe different types of act structures, it all falls into the same sphere of thinking about plotting. And also I can take I can also pause here to, in case anyone had any questions so far, because I know I just talked a lot about different forms of plot structure. Are we good? Oh, what is a standard page count? In screenwriting, for a long time, people said 90 pages. 90 pages or 120 pages. And the typical rule of thumb was like a page is a minute. So it's like a 90-minute movie was like seen as like the ideal standard. That's why. But obviously we know that movies have not just been 90 minutes. They have been long, and they're not just 120 minutes. There has definitely been longer movies in the world. But for a long time that was seen as like the ideal standard for filming. Okay. All right. And yes, and Jamie asks, does the determination of structure come first? So do you mean like determination of, do you mean like the structure dictates the story, or could you elaborate a little bit more about that?
I just wondered that in the process, when you have the story concept, is the decision if it's 3 acts or 4 or 5, does that sometimes evolve when you're determining how much time for each section mounting and descending?
I feel like it goes both ways depending. I definitely know there are playwrights who, because a lot of like theaters have requirements about time length, like people, that's why you don't see like the 25-minute play or the 5-minute play, or they definitely demarcate certain standards in order to make it the most producible. So that's why playwrights tend to think like, oh, I can write a 10-minute play and get it produced in these areas, because a lot of different venues produce 10-minute plays. Or if I do a 1-act, a 1-act is assumed to be at least about like 45 minutes or at least under an hour. That is what assumed a 1-act play is. And a full-length play is assumed to be at least 90 minutes. Even though obviously like plays have run longer, and it's very much like a business decision, as well as a creative decision. Like if you're a playwright and be like, if I'm really good at writing 1 act, that's great, but how many theaters are willing to produce just 1 act? As opposed to like a full-length 90-minute play or a 2-hour play with an intermission, So it's something that like does come into like conversation when playwrights think about their stories. And similarly with screenwriters. Great. And I also want to take a moment to talk about a new element to consider with structure, which has come up, in the form of, audience studies. on the academic side. And it is not just the structure of the play itself, but also the production of a play and how that affects people's thinking about storytelling. And it came out of the idea of like parasocial relationships. Parasocial relationships for is a concept of the imagined relationship between a witness or an audience member and the person that they're seeing. On stage, people have brought that up again, like in recent years, and talking about social media. Like, you think because you see someone on Twitter all the time that you're best friends, but it doesn't mean that you actually know each other. Like, this relationship is just parasocial. It's not actually existent, except you think it is because it's mediated through this other form. So in terms of, theater in the round, for example, it talks of, it's actually a classic staging from Greek theater, from Shakespeare, but people have now considered like, oh, what is the difference between an audience who can see in all directions, of a show, and an audience who can only see straight in front of them? How does that change the relationship between them and the story? How does it change the relationship between how they interpret the actors? Which is something really interesting to think about. I kind of make the equivalent that theater in the round in a novel form, is where we see either like very literary styles or experimental styles. Like for literary styles, it's like third person omniscience. The narrator can see into everyone's heads. The narrator might have their own opinion, but that is how they're introducing the reader to the story. I can also interpret that as being like an experimental type of storytelling, where it might be a perspective that jumps around. It might, in a way that is unconventional. It might be like the walls are talking, or this is the bird's eye view. It might be focused on thematically perspectives that connect together in the end. Like, I think Emily St. Mandel, I don't know if you've ever read of her works. She's like, I think she does a very good job on that type of writing, where like it's literary, it jumps around, for a lot of different character POVs, but it all touches like these same central themes of a novel. And it also leads, me to think about, well, what makes, if you just have the audience and the stage and the audience in front of you, how do you interpret that form of storytelling? I do think about that as something more straightforward and more commercial. Like, it's very simple to follow the ABC of a plot. It is very direct to see, like, to surmise like character intentions. It is something that is able to become very accessible, because the readership barrier of entry to understand, whether it's the concept, the plot, the characters, it is a pretty, it's a simple bar. So. For the next section, I'm going to talk a little bit about specific playwriter tricks that may be helpful when thinking about writing your prose novel. One is really about blocking and positioning. And it's something that I've seen writers do all the time, but they may not particularly describe it that way. And so I like to use the language of theater to emphasize, one, your characters are in a physical space, and they have to move around that physical space. And two, your characters, if you're looking at them from the outside, have a physicality to them. I've seen in a lot of writers who are like newer writers or writers who are trying to like develop their style, one of the weaknesses I would see in that work is they'd either one, have characters be in a void. Like they'd have really intense interiority. They know exactly what they're thinking of at any given moment. They have, but you have no idea where they are. You don't know how they're functioning in the space. Like, okay, so they're like in a car, but they don't say where the car is going. Or they're in a room, but they don't describe the room. And so you kind of feel like these characters are floating in the middle of nothing, but they're all like thinking very loudly, very strongly about something. Alternately, I've also seen as like a writing weakness, characters who are moving in a way that isn't natural. And it's easy to, envision your head characters that are like walking around in the room or pacing or moving around in a city or a forest or travel, but in a way that doesn't feel like the author has fully embodied the character. And whether it is like research mistakes, like I see this all the time, like when people try to write fight scenes, but they don't know how to choreograph, they don't know fight choreography, or they don't know how to like do it well in their heads. You see it all the time where like characters are just jumping around. Maybe there's a kick and a punch, but you don't know where the punch is landing, and you don't know how the kick is received. And the characters aren't like reacting, in a way that feels realistic to someone actually being punched, kicked, stabbed, pushed through a wall, what have you. So blocking is, for that, is also particularly important. So when I think about blocking, the three questions I always ask is, where's a character in a space at any given moment? How do they move across a space, or they don't move across a space, at any given moment? And even, if you're just saying these are two characters having a conversation in a room, things like how close are they sitting? How far away are they sitting? That is important, not just for blocking, but also communicates an emotional level to the characters and to the conversation that the characters may not be aware of, but the reader can definitely pick up. Two is like, how is a character gesturing? Even like right now, looking at you guys, I'm still moving around the Zoom screen. You don't see my hands, but I'm actually a person who talks with their hands a lot. Not all characters talk with their hands, but all characters are doing something, even if it's having a conversation with their body. And how could that add a layer of emotional, introspection to like what they're really thinking and feeling? It's also a great way to address a weakness I often see, where people tend to rely on like, he was sad or she was frustrated, as opposed to, like she, was staring down, at her tea, and and speaking in a monotone voice, or his like fingers kept flying, he was pulling his hair. There are ways to express someone's emotions through physical gesture, so you don't have to always rely on just saying, they felt X. And also, three is there is what makes theater performances interesting when you see a character on stage, is that half the time you're following what they're doing, and half the time you're thinking about what they're not doing, but you can tell that they're thinking it, or that they're feeling it, or that there's some other level to their communication that is being expressed. So what I do like a lot about blocking and character blocking is someone could be saying one thing, but their gestures and their bodily position could be indicative of another. Like a classic basic example is someone is like, oh, of course, like I will do XYZ and I'm not lying to you or whatever. Like, I like line tells a lot, whether it's like eyes off to the side or somehow they're trying to express something, but they have their arms crossed. So there's a lot of physical gestures that people do to indicate that they are feeling one thing while saying another thing. And I think that's really fascinating to see on the page. So ultimately, theater is action focused, and those motions define the character. I have like a writing exercise. We don't have to do it now. I have a couple of them inserted into this presentation. But one thing that you might want to write down and save for later, is the 6 ways to enter a room. And it's just like quick time yourself, give yourself like 5 minutes and just figure out, a character has one goal. And let's say the goal, like character's A goal is to convince character B to leave the room with them. And write it 6 different ways. But the 6 different ways show different types of blocking. And just thinking about how characters enter a room, and leave the room, opens up new directions of like, what kind of feelings are they feeling when they enter the room? How can that be expressed? What kind of outside pressures a character might feel? Like if they're on like, if they're under outside pressure, to convince character B to leave the room with them. If there's circumstantial things that would impact how a character enters the room. Like what if like character A was trying to break character B out of prison? All these things can provide like just like a fun little writing exercise, but it really makes you think about blocking and and how you can move characters about a room. Another, just gonna check for questions here. Yeah, I'm just agreeing with like in his comments to read aloud for screenwriting. There's a standard that the inciting incident happens around page 10. So that corresponds to 10 minutes into a movie, the inciting incident that happens that changes status quo. Yes, that's true. Oh, okay, that'd be awesome. Great. So, and the next, slide talks about dialogue. In theater, dialogue is the primary way to know anything about a character at all, aside from the stage directions and the blocking and whatever directorial directions might be placed on the show. So that being said, like the dialogue is the most important part of how an audience can suss out who a character is, and what are the important things the audience should be focused on in this show. Just like in the real world, when people talk, like no one says outright like, oh, I'm talking to you for this particular reason, what I want, in natural conversation. People always have hidden goals, and effective plays are able to have characters that have these unspoken wants, but the only way they can express it is to be able to talk about those wants in a way that doesn't feel like it's unconvincing to the other characters listening to them. So I often when line editing in particular, I come across a couple of things. Either the dialogue itself does not feel naturalistic or realistic, or purposely stylistic, because of course there is in novels the ability to have highly stylized dialogue, and like that's just the world, or like, hey, it's the 19th century, people talk that way. But being very conscientious about how people talk, making sure that each character has a distinct voice, that even if all these characters are like, for example, especially in historical pieces, even if all the characters are from a certain time period, they all have to talk distinctly, you know, that goes beyond beyond the norms of how people in the historical time period talked. I also think a lot about how characters always have a hidden goal. And in theater, the only way the audience can surmise what the goal is to figure out why are they bringing this into conversation? Why do they think this element is important to them right now in this scene with this other character? And so typically when I think about dialogue between characters on the line editing level, I usually think about what's the point of the dialogue, especially if it's especially if it's a very plot-oriented book, because sometimes dialogue is there to express a thematic element or symbolic element, or but there always has to be a purpose to the dialogue. Whether it's establishing, and it has to be establishing something, not just between the characters, but for the reader to pick up on. So when I'm looking at dialogue in a scene, something I think about structurally is, one, what does the character want at the beginning of the scene? Two, how are they trying to achieve those goals on the dialogue sense, aside from like whatever emotions they might be doing, whatever other plot mechanisms might be happening. And three, by the end of the scene, do they succeed? In terms of dialogue, I also like to read it out loud. There was a tweet recently that went out, from like another writer that was simply said, you know what I like to do? I like to read dialogue out loud. And I retweeted it and quote tweeted saying, that's the editorial secret. In plays and in screenwriting, you have table reads where all the characters, where the cast, and the writers have a chance to like sit down and read through the entire script out loud. And that is so effective because it helps you figure out, does it sound weird and awkward? Is this like natural to the character to say something like that? It can really help catch plot holes. Like, why are you saying this? I don't know. It could help with pacing. Frequently, when line editing, sometimes writers it's like the kill your darling syndrome, where there's just a piece of prose or a piece of like witty banter that you're like, I just love this moment because it's so clever, but it's more reflective about the clever aspect and not actually if it's working in that story right now. And sometimes the best way to kill your darlings is to read the whole thing aloud and then realize, wait a second, why is this here? I don't know why. Though, and also reading out loud really helps with experimental voices. Well, especially in things like second person POV, or third person, whether it's working. I think, like, for example, on the line editing level, I often see sometimes with like third person, like the author skipping around heads but not realizing it's inconsistent. Like, are you third person omniscient, narrator? Because now I'm seeing this line about character A and their thoughts, and then half a page later, you're talking about character B's thoughts. Like, is this the POV you're doing, or are you doing close third person narrator from a single POV? That is something I actually that comes up often enough to correct when the author isn't sure, and it just feels inconsistent in the writing because the reader doesn't know what to follow. And reading out loud can really help make the decision for the author about POV questions like that. Yeah, and a little writing exercise for those who want to like play with dialogue. Again, just 5 minutes, and the premise is there is only one pen. Both characters in the room want the pen, and they have to convince each other how they can win that pen over. So like that is something, again, a really good example of how you can play with dialogue and motivation in a very quick way. Okay, so I'm saying we have, all right, cool. So we have about like 5 minutes left, which is great because I have just like a couple more slides left. And for this, okay, thank you, Natasha. So for this, I want to just address theme and symbol, which is, I think, an element that playwrights and authors both love to do in their books. And they approach it differently. With playwrights, because everything is contained in a single space in one sitting, anything about symbolism has to be noticeable by the audience. And again, it could be something that is seen in the stage directions, but the director brings it out. It could be something that is actually an actor choice. Like the actor's like, I'm wearing this red hat for this very specific reason. See if, and that is in line with the playwright's message about the play. Who can pick it up? So themes and symbols could be collaborative decisions and not necessarily dictated by the play itself. But is something that is definitely on the page, but it's the director and the actors and everyone else in the production bringing those elements and putting their own spin to make the symbolism, make this theme come alive. I think it's a great strategy for a novelist to think about how those themes and symbols can also be represented in their book in a way that is noticeable to an audience. And again, it could seem like a character choice. It could seem like a significant scene that is very visual, but is a repeated motif. It could be interpreted as something that happens in the beginning that returns again and again in different forms. And when thinking about theme and symbol, I also like to address the idea of Chekhov's gun. The famous quote is right here. If you have hung a pistol on the wall in the first act, then the following one should be fired, otherwise don't put it there. And while like Chekhov could mean it literally, it could also be taken more metaphorically in writing a book and thinking about, it is a prop or set piece or a significant scene. Is it there for a purpose? Oftentimes, and again, this is associated with the idea of kill your darlings, like a writer might be really in love with including this particular highlighted scene, like this moment or this turn of phrase that they absolutely love because it's but one of the things to be aware of is that when you're working with theme and symbol, and the idea of Chekhov's gun is that sometimes when a writer makes a big deal out of a certain element because they think it's cool, but actually doesn't work in the book, the readers might interpret it as like, oh, is that part of the theme of the book? Because you like wrote like a page and a half about how to like carve a turkey, and you're super descriptive about turkeys, but you don't talk about turkeys at all for the rest of the book. It's a turkey, a symbol. Maybe it is a symbol, maybe it isn't, but it's something that a writer should be aware of. Like any emphasis they place on a certain element, even if it seems really minor, could be interpreted as part of a theme or a symbol that the author didn't intend. And that I think is the heart of the idea of Chekhov's gun, is that when anything as part of a stage piece or is representative of the inner world of the play, the audience will be highly aware of that, and you're setting up expectations with that piece. So it has to all connect together, and there has to be a payoff. Otherwise, it's a plot hole, it's an inconsistency, it's something that is open to interpretation that may not be what you want to be interpreted. Okay. And that concludes my presentation. Yay! I'm enjoying all the silent clapping. I will stop my. Oh, actually, I'll just leave this up. So for additional resources and Q&A. But does actually, I'll stop share now. Does anyone have any questions? I know there was a lot of information.
Does anybody here have?
Nope.
Does anybody here have questions? Neil?
Yeah. Can a children's story also be made into a playwright? As a novel?
It happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Did you hear that?
No, I didn't.
Could you repeat the question?
He asked whether a children's story could be made into a play, and we kind of said in the room, sure, of course, but there was just an idea about if you've got a novel, a children's novel, how easy is it to turn into a play, for example?
And
short story.
that's an interesting question because it's all about adaptation. And adaptation is a whole other like sphere of writing. Like for like an anecdotal example, I work at a podcast company, and I have taken novellas and adapted them into plays, into audio dramas. And the process of that is extremely like different in some ways, because it's taking the core of the prose work and reinterpreting it for a different medium. So for example, it could, because in particular this is an audio drama, there are things that work, for example, had worked really well as visuals on the page, but don't work as well in audio because it's just a mishmash of sounds. One of the things in my current adaptation is that there is a lot of really interesting fight scenes in the original novella that we had to adapt to audio. And even if it was interesting in prose, it was harder to communicate listening to it because explosion sounds are, to an extent, like are all the same. And you can't see the choreography. And you have to think about choreography and movement in terms of, how do you follow a sound across a scene, for example? Or while all this chaos is happening, could the character be, having dialogue with another character? And you can still have that same action and tension in the scene, but it's conveyed between the stakes set up in the characters' dialogue as they're like running for their lives, or as they're like fighting all these monsters, and not necessarily because you see all this kung fu action happening. Great, thank you.
So Diana,
Yes.
I just made a note in the chat about your how much I really you're talking about theme and symbol resonated with, especially with what I'm writing about right now. But I was thinking when you showed the gun and Chekhov and so forth, those points, it feels like in my case, I'm writing historical fiction, and so the gun is not about today's violence with, you know, school shootings and the kinds of things that are just in the news and horrible tragedies and all of that. So I just wanted to just make that comment that I think the context of how these symbols are used is just absolutely vital, that the readers get it, that there that it may not, the same kinds of connotations may not apply if you're in today's world. You know what I mean? The reader just sees gun and thinks they may, we don't know for sure, of course, but they may because of news and the whole, so many horrible things that have happened in the recent decade or so. It may just have terrible connotations as opposed to something that's sort of normal and usual, say on a ranch, and not used to kill people. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. You know, and that's very true as well. Like context is extremely important when talking about, you know, what kind of prop pieces and what kind of like scene setting you have, and what, you know, what items or themes could be seen as like symbolic or important.
Right.
So
so much dimension to all these things, every topic. It was a great presentation. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm glad there's like reading through the comments that people are have gotten a lot out of the presentation as well, which is really great.
Yeah.
So
it's really good.
So yeah, I wasn't sure about like time check, if you know, how much time do we have for Q&A? Did people want me to like talk a little bit more about audio drama?
Diana, we have one
Anything like that?
question with Robin's got her hand up. Robin, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Okay, hi Diana. I just wanted to let you know that I really enjoyed your presentation. And I just think it's really interesting to learn the ins and outs about screenwriting. I'm primarily a poet, so I don't write prose, but one of my first writing experiences was when I was a kid. I must have been 9 or 10 years old, and I decided I wanted to write a script for the Batman television series. You guys of my
That's
generation,
great.
you remember, it was so formulaic. You know, it was, you know, introduce a crime, and then that, you know, leads up to the colorful villain. So I had my own, you know, 2 acts basically, you know, sort of 2 acts with the one day, and you're probably too young to remember this, Diana. But anyway, I had my own colorful villain, Batman versus the Balloon Woman. And it was a full script written out for like, you know, 9, 10-year-old kid, but it was so much fun. And I think I'd love to try my hand at it again someday. And so maybe you'll inspire me to do that.
Oh, thanks. So
it was great.
And it's really good to know that like this presentation also translates to like different types of writers and resonates with them, you know, and inspires them to try a new form.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's give Diana, unmute yourself. Give her a round of applause. It's awkward to do this, you know, hybrid. We're still figuring it out. We had 2 months, we had our legs under us, Diana, and then, you know, we got sidewinded again, and now here we are doing this whole like roundabout thing. So thank you. I learned a lot, and I think everybody they did too. So thank you for coming to us today. And
Yeah.
stick around. We're going to go into some other club business, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So so I'll log off for now. But again, if people like have any follow-up questions, or just like want to learn more, definitely like check out my website. Feel free to reach out, through that contact form. Even if I'm not sure if I'm going to type in the chat, because I'm not sure if it's just literally my name.com, but you know what I mean. I am more than happy to follow up any questions from this presentation that people might have. And the site, the podcast studio that I work for is Realm Media, and you can find that at realm.fm, which I also just put in the chat.
Oh, great.
So
Thank you. And thank
yes.
you to Marilyn too, who set all this up. Set us up for great speakers, Marilyn. So thank you.
Oh, you're
Great.
so welcome.
So at this point, we're going to transition into, you're going to have to look at my back for a second online. I'm sorry, because I'm in person and I got to do it this way. So
All right.
you guys get the benefit of this, but now it's over here. So welcome.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Diana.
And I'm not going to
You want to
stand.
go up there, Sean? And I'll,
You want to flip it around?
yeah,
All
flip
right.
it.
I just, at my age, I don't have a whole lot to look at back there anyway, so we'll just stick that up.
There you go, Sean.
My wife is pleasantly rolling her eyes, but she's really saying that she's got a mask on, so.
She wants your pen.
What's my pen?
No, it's an exercise that,
Oh.
sorry.
Anyway, at this point of the meeting, we have an opportunity for people to come up and talk about what's going on. We want to do a club announcement as far as membership. And
Yeah.
everything else. And then we have a couple chairs that I know want to, and then we'll open up for members to just come up and talk about what's going on. So Roger, our membership director and chair, is going to speak first.
Welcome, everybody. One announcement is we now have over 250 members.
Whoa.
Oh,
We had some 10 new members join just in February. I think probably they wanted to participate in the poetry anthology and got their names in. But do we have any new members here in the meeting? That's it. Want to tell us who you are? Tell us who you are.
Oh.
And what kind of writing do you do?
Well, my name is Wayne Benson. I write under my full name, which is Troy W. Benson. I write science fiction and thriller. I've been published on Amazon, but that's a black hole, so I kind of got away from that last year. Now I'm trying it on Smashwords and Drafted Digital.
Yeah. Well, welcome. And I think you'll find that there's a large number of similar kind of writers here in this club who are interested in sci-fi or fantasy. We've got an excellent example back here, one of our premier writers in terms of that genre. But I'm sure you're going to find some real welcoming in the club.
That's why I'm here.
Good. We have a couple more months till we start renewals. Renewals begin in June. It's important that you kind of pay attention to the newsletter about events that are happening within the club. Oh, are you a new member?
I am.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
No.
Tell us who you are.
My name is Beth Shepard. I'm from Sonoma, Montana, via San Francisco. And I'm a poet.
Great.
I'm proud to say.
And were you able to submit to the anthology this year?
I did not.
Okay.
No, I'm a little short on time.
Well, that's all right. One thing was probably, of the 250 members, We have over 150 members that actively are publishing. The rest are, in the process of writing something to be published probably. But we have a large contingent of memoirists, but we have an equally large contingent of poets. So I think you're going to find a home here. Hope you do. And we'll have at least a contest coming up, I think. Yeah, that would involve poetry. So some, special things. And you always can submit poetry to the newsletter. So if you have a piece just a little piece that you'd like to share, submit it to, there's our newsletter editor, Chrissy. And it goes to, actually to a woman named Sky Blaine, but goes to our newsletter. And we submit a couple poems, we publish a couple poems every month. Isn't that right, Chrissy? Yeah. Oh, good. Well, again, welcome and welcome to everybody.
Thank you. So I've got, I'm gonna turn it, it's gonna be kind of weird, but I see Robin here. Robin, you wanna talk, are you still on? Where did you go? You wanna talk about your next salon?
Yes, our next salon is April 23rd. It's on a Saturday. We are having live in-person meetings now. For the moment, they're here at my house. If you sign up on the Redwood Writers website, I will send you directions the week before the salon, the week before that Saturday. So that's April 23rd. We have had some people sign up already, even though Writer's Circle comes before us. Linda will be having Writer's Circle next Saturday, I believe. So, or maybe I'm wrong. Was it last Saturday? Anyway.
It's coming up.
Okay, good. So yeah, so salon though is in April because we switch months. We do it every other month. And Writer's Circle, for those who are new and don't know, is the basically no judgment readings. You come, you read your piece. There's no critique. There's no, it's sort of like a no judgment zone, only positive comments and
food,
yeah.
Robin.
Yeah.
Don't forget food.
It's a wonderful place. It's a wonderful place to come and try out your new stuff. We try to have a little theme every time. This time it's spring. So come and read your poetry or your prose about spring or about anything you want to read about. It's 5-minute limit. Sign up and I hope you'll come and give it a try. It's a fun group of people.
So we love that you're doing it, and now that we can do it in person again, I think it's going to be a little bit easier. And I'm going to use that just as this quick segue while I still have info folks online and here. Coming up in April and moving forward, this particular facility has an honor system set up to where these are not required. I didn't have enough time to let everybody know. So by a show of hands, I'm going to do this as a group consensus. Because assuming that 90% of Sonoma County is vaccinated or double vaccinated, that is a personal prerogative. So by a show of hands, how many people are comfortable showing up without a mask?
Do you have our speaker is a new company?
Say it one more time.
Our speaker is a new company.
Is she going to be here in person?
Yeah.
Okay, so I did not realize that, but that's okay. So it's about 50-50. How about online? I wasn't looking over here. You guys hear
Must have gone off screen.
I did?
No, most have gone off screen. So,
I will send out a note from me to get a full consensus of the 250 memberships, so we're not making this in a too small of a sample size. Understanding in April, we are going to continue to have masks because Judy just informed me our speaker is immune compromised. So out of respect for that speaker, who's been on the books for quite some time, we will have masks for April. Moving forward, we'll get that survey out and establish whether or not these are necessary, okay? So.
we just heard somebody's dog.
Somebody's dog. So at this point, is there anything you want to say, Judy? Judy, come on up. Our Vice President, Judy Baker.
Yeah, that's the perfect spot, Judy, right there. Yeah, that's great.
I just wanted to thank you all for
being here today, and I'm so happy that we can continue to do hybrid. It gives us the opportunity to have people from all over who might not want to travel to Sonoma. I don't know why you would want to travel to Sonoma, but we know that that is true. And at the moment, I'm just going to picture this. If anybody here is interested in supporting us in the role of speaker coordinator, Marilyn stepped down. I'm doing it in the interim, which is very easy because we've got all of these wonderful people lined up. But being the speaker coordinator means reaching out to other people, other clubs, and sourcing speakers. We don't need any more speakers until 2022. So you have a chance to get 2023. Oh, I know. Time has gone so funny for you.
Right.
But it's a really great opportunity because you get to know people that you might want to know, but now you've got a good reason to contact them. And so it helps you get more immersed in the world of publishing. And I think it's great. So our next event is going to be on the 16th of April, and Diane Frank is going to be talking to us about inspiration of music, poetry, and words. So how these different mediums influence each other. So it's a great follow-on to what Diana did today. So I hope you will be here for that. And she is planning to be here in person, so that'll be very exciting. So thanks.
And I just gotta say too, it's fun. I'm not a screenwriter, I'm not a playwright, but a lot of us who do write, whether it's short stories or novels, it's really helpful. And I love what Diana did today of taking somebody who's an accomplished editor and playwright and breaking it down into a process of how that would apply to our prose writing, whether it's prose fiction or nonfiction, whatever the case may be. There's a structure that happens. It's just every time we get these new speakers, I learn something new. I took 4 or 5 pages of notes. Chrissy, is there anything that you want to talk about, member announcements wise? And then I have, where's Nancy? You're over here. Chrissy Langlois. Oh yes, thank you. I'll stand here with you. Is this our baby?
No, come over this way. Yeah, there you go.
All right.
It's here.
It's here.
You got to come here to get it.
You have to come. Yeah, come to the general meeting. Got photo op.
Yeah, on channel.
So come to the meeting. Come get a book. If you haven't gone on Amazon, you get it here at a little bit of a discount. Plus, you can have members sign your stories or sign their stories, or just see it in person.
Yeah, who was that that did that? Was that Melena?
No,
Melena asked
Yeah,
autographs.
Melena.
You show up, you have a story in here, you can autograph the book for some people.
And then my other announcement is the newsletter deadline has come and passed, but you know me, get stuff to me by tomorrow night, I'll get it in there. So you can email me at editor@redwoodwriters.org, and we'll get it in. Member announcements?
Go ahead while you're up here so you don't have to come up front. Just,
What a transition.
Just wanted to give everyone a heads up that I have published my next book, and it is a
Bring it
romance.
closer to
It's a
this.
rom-com.
Yeah, there you are.
Okay. It's a fun rom-com. It is locally set. It is, it's actually set in Petaluma. So if you guys want to read a local, fun love story, this is it. There are no chickens, but there's a macaw.
The macaw, can I say something? I was blessed to be an early reader on this book. It's really a fun read.
Yeah, Pamela got
If
to
you
read
read
it.
it for nothing but that bird, he's great.
oh, the first one.
And she did a wonderful job. One of the things that came up in the talk today was about setting your, your locales and making it believable. And, it really was. I actually wrote her and said, does this really exist? Because it was so real and I want to go there.
Yeah, and I have a bunch of fun places that are in there that, most of them might change the names, but if you're local, you recognize a few places, so.
You will.
That's it. Thank you.
And a lot of the influences mom and dad have. So. And then Nancy, you want to come up and talk about contests? We have, one of the things for the new members, we do contests 3, sometimes 4 times a year. One of them is almost always a poetry contest, but we have some form of prose contest. And here is Nancy to talk about that. Nancy Martin.
Yeah, you can come in a little bit, Nancy, there. Come in a little more. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so today we're launching our new short story prose contest. And the deadline for this is midnight, 4/16, and of course, you're gonna get all this information on the website. It's maximum 2,500 words, and the theme is imagine. So can you imagine? I never imagined. What or who in your imagination has inspired you, and where does your imagination take you? We have 3 judges who graciously offered to take on this task. I'm very grateful to them. And they are Janice Rowley, Daniel Koshnier, and Deborah Taylor French, and their bios will be on the website, so you can read their bios. The entry fee is $10 for members and $15 for non-members. The winners are first place $100, second place $50, third place $25. So I just want to remind you all, as Roger has reminded us in the past, that the submission guidelines will be clearly stated wherever it's printed. And so you want to be sure that you adhere to those guidelines, because if you don't, it's really likely that those judges are just going to discard your story. So think very carefully before you press that send button. You know, go over it one more time and send us all your imaginings, and good luck. Thank you.
Great.
And one other thing, Nancy's graciously stepped up to this.
forgot.
You want to talk about that part?
Sure,
or no?
sure, I
You can
forgot.
do it. But she is finding herself better suited for another role, and as president, I get an opportunity to transition either I or Judy or whoever is nominated for the next president. She's willing to be the secretary position. So you want to go picture what this is?
Sure,
You may want to do it.
so much like Judy asked for a new chair, so we'll be looking for a new contest chair. And actually, in taking on this task, I've developed a whole really helpful file for anyone who wants to take this on. I took a lot of the mystery out of it, and so I can send all that to you. So let the board know if you would be interested in taking on the position as contest chair. We really need someone to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy.
I know that's kind of weird to launch a contest and say, by the way, we need a new contest chair, but part of it is Nancy's worked in 3 different part-time jobs, and it's, putting it all together and coordinating it, it just, it happens. So I thank you for stepping up and pulling this off, because this is a great theme, and we've got
Great judges.
great judges. We have a month to put it together, and I would like to have somebody else besides the normal winners. And I'm going to say that they know who they are. They're very good writers, but the more they enter, the better possibility with these great judges that we might have somebody.
Just don't let Jean
It's not
Wan,
named
just
Jean
don't
Wan.
let Jean Wan know. Just don't let her know we have a contest. Sorry, Jean.
You send that to Neil? Yes. Hold on one quick sec. I'm going to do the rest of the chair announcements and then make sure I don't miss anything. Elena, is there anything we need to have you come up here for, or you're good? Chris did it, I did it. Next month, Judy already did it. Come on up. Anybody who has something club related, member announcements, is your time now.
Oh, also ask the Zoom audience, raise their hands if you have a announcement on Zoom.
Okay, My name is Neil Bergstaller.
Yeah, that's good,
Sorry.
right there, that's right.
My name is Neil Bergstaller. I've been a member of the Redwood Writers ever since 2018. And I would like to mention to you, just recently, I had my very first book published. And I already sold it to someone a couple days ago. So
Well, that's even better.
And I would like to add, I just sent another book to the person who's helped me to get it published so that I might have it published again. So we'll just have to wait and see at this point. But I just thought I'd just share it with you. I'm just so excited, I can't even talk.
I have a really fun one. Now the date is set, but it may get altered. April 13th, Peter Coyote is the speaker for Napa Valley Writers. And I was invited to be the member reader. So I get to read, I have up to 7 minutes. And I'm trying to decide if we're gonna do a story at home or combination or just one or the other. But it's gonna be online, so nobody has an excuse if they can't get there. And it will be, the actual date and the event will be posted on the Napa Valley Writers Club website very shortly. But I encourage you to show up because it's really fun.
Yeah.
So I was so honored, I couldn't believe it.
Cool.
So I'll see you guys there.
You're right there is great.
Okay, so I don't have any books to show, but I am currently going to be in 3 new anthologies, which is awesome. And all of it's just because I made friends on the internet. And it's just 3 different overlapping groups of people that are just putting together anthologies. One of them is about Greek mythology retellings, because a bunch of us were already in like this group chat thing, and we submitted to 2 different calls for Greek mythology retellings and didn't make it in, and we kept joking, hey, we can make an anthology if none of us make it in. Hey, yeah, let's do that. So I have 2 stories in there. One of them is if Narcissus was a vampire who wanted to have a reflection. Great, so much fun.
Okay.
And the other one is this part of the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, only they're robots and it's all cyberpunk and cool. So that's one. And other people are doing really neat stuff and it's amazing. Another one is just shapeshifter things, just whatever you feel like putting together. So I've got the girl squad of Mermaid, Selkie, and Swan Maid who are having their girls' night in the human town, and then pirates start causing problems and they have to deal with the problems. And that was fun too. And the other one, no one started writing it, but we're world building this giant urban fantasy monster city, and it's all very cool, and I get to write about the Minotaurs, and they're in charge of public transportation because they're like a good direction. So I have a lot of fun, and it's awesome. And some of the same writer friends just decided that since one of them has been writing a book that is about a magic school, only the teachers are the main characters, and she's having a hard time. The people tell her the marketing's not going to happen. Magic schools are always supposed to be like 1 student, that's what you do. But there's so many people saying, no, I would rather read about the teachers. I'm kind of tired of hearing about the students. And so now there's going to be a bunch of people writing those. And now I have all these ideas about, because I know a lot of teachers, and I used to teach briefly. So I'm going to have a lot of fun coming up with ideas like, oh, well, base this one on that friend who's the goblin wizard who sits on top of the refrigerator in the staff lounge, and I think this is going to be fun. So if anyone wants to network on the internet, I have suggestions and tips. Twitter is quite a big deal these days, and there's a lot of really cool people out there. And you can get into anthologies just by making friends, and that's a lot like this group, honestly. So many friends, so many opportunities to do stuff, and it's amazing. Just want to share.
Mara, you're not allowed to submit to the contest. I know that right now because look at all the things you just invented, imagined. That's great.
Yeah, you imagine. Oh, well, let's narrow that down.
Yeah, those are wonderful. Thanks.
I'm Pamela Heck, and this is just sort of related to the club, but I am not only a writer, I'm also an artist. And so I have 3 pieces that were juried into the Grayton Gallery, one of them which incorporates one of my poems. I noticed that the doors seem to be open here to the Pearson building, which is the one right over here, and the Santa Rosa Art Center has an art show up right now. It's really wonderful. I have a piece there, and the Cloverdale Arts Alliance Gallery, which Roger's really familiar with, just has a new show that went up today. So if you're in Cloverdale on a Friday or Saturday, I'm a resident artist there, and I'd love to have you come in and see our artwork. So I think art and writing very closely tied together.
Thanks, Pam.
Do you have anybody on the virtual world? Because I was looking this way, I was actually, just turn my back on.
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand, jump up and down. Joan, you got anything? No?
I think we're done.
I think we are done, and I want to thank all of you for being, accepting or being as kind as you could with some of the technical difficulties.
Oh, Joelle's got her hand up.
Joelle?
The new contest is live on the website.
Oh,
The new contest is live. She's got it live.
The contest is live on the website. Did you get that?
great.
Yes. There's nothing worse we know than not announcing something and then finding out, oh no, we gotta call Joelle. For those who don't know, Joelle makes sure that all those things get posted on the website in the proper position, and all the links follow through to what's called a gravity form. So when you submit it, we get to collect that and pass it off to the judges and figure out who is all paid up, done it right, and crossed their I's and dotted their T's. So thank you all for being here. We'll be back next month, the 16th, is that right? 16th of April. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Roger.